With your chef's knife, which is probably the knife that you're going to use most likely at home. This is, I think, an 8 or a 10-inch one. You can buy 8-inch or even smaller if you feel comfortable with that. I personally feel pretty comfortable with the long knife, especially when you're cutting herbs. You have a nice surface area going on. But what you want to do is, and it will be awkward, it will most certainly be not a natural thing for you in the beginning, but you're going to work your knife from the tip to the heel, and your fingers are going to be tucked in. So here's the difficult part. Your wrist will be twisted out. Your thumb is behind, not coming around the side, because if it comes around the side, you really run the risk of chopping it off. Nothing will be in front of this knuckle right here. So everything is tucked in tight. You're going to hold your product, whether it's a carrot or a piece of celery. The knife is actually going to rock from the tip to the heel, and you're going to actually make contact with the blade with this little knuckle joint right here. Everything else is tucked back behind. You can work your knife through the product, or you can push the product through the knife with your thumb. You can push it through. But the idea is this rocking motion back and forth. Don't let your thumb slide around the side, and don't let your fingers come forward. Let me roll into a couple of knife cuts. Let's start with the onion. There's lots of things we can do with the onion, and we cut onions a ton. So let me do a little dice, something that not everyone is probably familiar with, but if you have a nice sharp knife, it's easy to do. So the core, I just leave it on for now. And then again, tucking your fingers in there. Now if you want a wide dice, you can cut wide. If you want a very small dice, you can cut very close. So go for a sort of a medium dice. And then you are going to make a couple of cuts here. Just come in a little bit. Okay. And what that does is it keeps the sides from flailing out a little bit on you when you start slicing. So we have all these cuts across, and now we're going to work that motion of tip to heel, tip to heel. Okay. So when you start to just mush it around a little bit, you'll see a lot of nice even knife cuts, nice dice. So there we go with that. I'm just going to grab a plate real quick. Another thing that you really need to do is keep your cutting board clear. I see a lot of people start cutting different vegetables and chicken and things, and they start having a smaller and smaller place to work. And that becomes dangerous because you're cramping yourself in, and it's just not efficient. You can't move fast, and it becomes increased risk of cutting yourself. So that is one way to cut dice an onion. Another knife cut that's sort of nice to talk about is a julienne. You can do it on carrots, you can do it on potato, you can do it whatever you like. I actually like to take the core out of the onion. We'll get to it. If there is anything left there for the core, just pop it off. Little V cut. I always try to work with a flat surface. No matter what you're doing, try to work with a flat surface. Lends stability to whatever you're doing. So if it's really high up in the air, you have to lift that knife up real high, and that's where you start getting a little shaky. You want to keep the knife tip on the cutting board. So for this example, you can just take a couple of layers off, and then you just get that rocking motion. Get a nice julienne. This is great for salad. You can marinate the onions in some red wine vinegar if you want to do sort of a pickled vegetable type of thing. But that's a nice julienne. And again, you could do the same. Put a couple pieces together. If they fall apart, no big deal. And really, you see that I'm keeping those fingers tucked, really, really tucked. Thumb is behind. So I'm really not at risk of slicing my fingers because the knife is running along that knuckle joint right there. And that's the only thing that's moved forward. Nice julienne. Let me show you a nice cut that's nice for the winter time. If you're going to do a stew, any kind of a braised item. Call it paysan cuts, one of my favorite cuts, a la paysan. And really, you may know that as a barrel cut. Some people call it a barrel cut, but I think I like to call it a paisan cut. Then I start thinking of all kinds of good, yummy food. So, okay, so the way that works is you're going to make your first cut, and then you just roll the carrot. You have to be careful of your fingers. Maintain that fingers are tucked in. These are great to blanch and then saute. Finish them off, put them on top of a beef stew or lamb pot pie, something like that. You can cook them separate and then saute them with some garlic and herbs. But that's a nice barrel cut right there. So just a little bit different, just something to show, something to do. Let's do tomato. Tomato is really when it's important to have a nice sharp knife. You can use a Santuco. Santuco is nice to work with because of these little ribs. It actually helps things not to stick to the knife so much. So see how that just really was a very effortless cut. And that's the beauty of it. So you know, you can dice them, slice them. Here's something that we can do. Save the center. But if you want to if you're making a nice salad, I mean, this can go in a stock, no problem. If you're making a nice salad, sometimes it's nice to have something that looks a little more uniform. So you can cut that out, and then we go back to the long slice or julienne, sort of a big julienne. And working with the Santuco, things sort of don't stick to the blade as much as maybe with a chef's knife. So there you go. That's real nice, I think, for a salad. I'm going to go back to the chef's knife. It's my favorite all-purpose knife. Whenever you work with anything, you want to have a flat surface, even if it means a tiny bit of waste. But generally, you can find a use for it. You can come back. It depends on how particular you want to be. If you want a perfect brunoise, which is 1/8 of an inch by 1/8 of an inch, then you might have some waste. If you're doing a rough chop and you're doing a sauteed potato for a hash brown or something, it's not really a big deal. But the flat surface is a big deal. You don't want things rolling around when you're cutting, and that's the thing, to always start with a flat surface. If you really like, again, if you're really looking for a very, very specific cut, you can square it off. Tip to heel, put them all the same length, all the same width. And you can sort of unstack them, come across. Again, same width, try to be consistent, make an effort to cut them the same. Again, if you really want to be specific, and you can cut a little bit of that away, put it in a potato stew or soup or something. So right here, we have very, very nice, consistent dice. There you go. A julienne is 1/8 of an inch by 1/8 of an inch by about 2 to 2.5 inches. Same process here. Get yourself a flat side to work with. Okay. You do want a clean cut on this. So it's thin cut there. Keeping your fingers tucked. Stack them up. Stack 3 if you feel comfortable. Stack 2 if you don't. If the knife is sharp, it's really a lot easier to do. And then you just come through. And you have your julienne. So just wrapping it up. Most important thing about any cut, so you become just more comfortable in the kitchen, is to keep those fingers tucked, wrists out from the hip, and nice, easy. You sort of loose on the knife. You see, I actually choke up on the knife a little bit. Put my pointer finger around the top. It helps it to keep stable, so you're not rocking all over the place. Keeps it straight up and down. And just very gentle. There's not a lot of tension through this arm. It's just letting the knife do the work. That's it. Happy cooking. Happy cutting.